Take it away, Vernon.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. You could just wave or something. I know everybody's muted, so that'll work. That way we know we're all in communication. So I'd like to say thank you to Kathy for this invitation, and I'd like to thank my co-presenter this morning, River Ramos, for her participation. I believe Kathy saw me speak upstate, and that was how I ended up getting this invitation. What we find in New York City, especially in our public schools, is that our students actually get surveyed about how safe they feel within their school, not just from a physical safety standpoint, but from a mental awareness standpoint. And one of the things that constantly came up was that there was a perceived lack of sensitivity from school-related law enforcers as it pertained to the LGBTQ community. This also extended through the NYPD and its interactions with LGBT as a whole from a citywide perspective. At the time that the department started to really embrace the understanding that there would have to be a better source of communications between the two entities, I was the curriculum coordinator for school safety training, along with another officer who was the curriculum coordinator for police recruit training. We were tasked at the time with attending a series of meetings between, at that time, the NYPD's commissioners, chiefs, and everyone involved with members of the LGBT community to find out what we could do to increase not just our awareness, but the levels of sensitivity in which people were treated. I think people can readily agree that everyone can have their own thoughts and feelings about anything, not just LGBT. But for us in particular, those of us who are of service, especially law enforcement, this mindset has to be one of what can I do for you as opposed to what can I do to you. So we were tasked with not just implementing things into the curriculum. It was at a point in this department's history where things actually had to be created. So the presentation you're going to see this morning was something that has undergone years worth of evolution from its inception to what you may see now. And it is something that has always had me in a position where I've had to constantly update and therefore keep myself educated. One of the things that I found is that a lot of times people think the only source of information they can get has to come directly from the LGBTQ community. That's my source of information, but I'm not, as my life, part of that community. You could call me at this point, if there's any familiarity with the terminology, an ally. However, I'm a married grandfather, I got kids. One has nothing to do with the other, as it shouldn't, but it creates such a different level of attentiveness, especially when I'm addressing law enforcement. Sometimes they can be such a bunch of knuckleheads. I will readily admit that. And when that comes from a kid, to hear that a student say, we hear your officers say things and they act as if we're not even there, or that we don't listen, or that we're not hearing, really made us take a closer look at the level of insensitivity. And then when we do focus groups and we talk to people, a lot of times they don't even realize that they're being insensitive. It's not always this egregious terminology or defamatory statements. They are simple things that just so that there's a certain level of ignorance, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it from an uneducated, uninformed manner, that they don't know the terminology. They are so afraid a lot of times of saying or doing the wrong thing and then offending somebody. I usually find that they are wondering, are they supposed to, in a sense, ignore their eyes? It's like, if I see someone that looks like a guy and I say, excuse me, young man, and they go, well, I'm not a young man. They get so confused, like that shakes their equilibrium so fast, they don't know how to proceed. So what we have found is that through these series of workshops, one is a sensitivity workshop, which is what you're going to see first. I'm going to blaze through it. I don't really have the dedicated time to take you through each slide, but I want you to get a general idea of how we present this to individuals, along with a gender identity seminar, which has paid bigger dividends right now for us in the schools, especially here in New York City, as we also scan. So the fact that we have schools that are dedicated to metal detection, that causes sometimes of serious disruption when young men and young ladies go back and forth with how they gender identify. There are days when they come in and they gender identify as male, and then there are other days when they come in and gender identify as female. And then the agents now get stuck wondering, well, what do I do? Do I scan like normal? Do I send them to the other line? It's like, no, you just do the way you would do anybody else. You don't have a right to tell them who they are. You can't say, oh, well, you were a girl yesterday, you go back to the girls line today. No, if they identify as male today, you get them in, you scan them, and you send them on their way. If there's no incident, that's the whole point. There's no incident. And we try to keep things flowing with as little to no disruption as possible. And we try to remind people, if you make a big deal out of it, that's when it becomes a big deal. You have to establish this sense of normality. It may not be normal for you, but it's normal for them. Therefore, their normality is your reality. Therefore, you just have to flow with it. It doesn't matter what you think, how you feel. Just understand sometimes at certain levels, things are what they are. And the more flexible you are, the more open-minded and willing you are to learn and to understand and even to question those things you don't understand, the more you'll find you'll be embraced, because they at least know you are trying. You know, it's funny that because I do this presentation, there's people around me who think like, oh, I'm some sort of an expert now. I've actually had my own brother-in-law who had my niece go to college, and she was going for about a month and a half, and she calls home and goes, hey, you guys, I just want you to know that I wanted to let you know that I am gender non-binary, so therefore I'm no longer to be dressed as him or her, identify as this or that. So right away, they hang up the phone and go, okay. And then they call me and go, so what does that mean? And I go, it means you can't say she. And she told you exactly what it means. Next question. What is, somebody tell me real quick, what do you think the next question was? Type it in the chat. What was the next question? Or you can unmute yourself and just shout it out. What do you think the next question was? Was she what?
Is she gay, lesbian? Like they want to put a label on her. Like what is she?
Correct. Absolutely correct. Is she gay? I said, did you ask her? And they were like, no. I said, so then how do you expect me to know the answer to that question? I said, and one thing you have to understand, gender identity has nothing to do with her sexuality. I said, that's a different conversation, and it's a different sense of awareness. I said, you have to ask those questions. You're her parents, I'm not. It was like, well, can't you talk to her? I said, I will not. I said, because she opened up to you. I said, when she decides to talk to me, I'll talk to her. I said, but she told you. I said, and if you have questions, this is the time for you to ask and learn who your child is. And, you know, everything progressed from there. But you know, they got mad at me because I started laughing. I was like, why are you calling me? Well, you do this stuff. I said, what do you mean this stuff? This is not this stuff. This is life as it presents itself. I said, so you guys got to open up your mind to the fact that, all right, she's not she's not who you thought she was. She's not what you wanted her to be. So how do you get beyond yourself to now accept her as she is? I said, what you gonna tell me? You don't love her no more? They were like, oh no, she's our daughter. We're gonna love her forever. I said, so then remember that and now move forward. So without further ado, that's an introduction of who I am and a little bit what this is about. And can everybody see my shared screen? Yes or no? You should see the LGBTQIA open sensitivity slide. That's who I am. and this is what I do. And this is where I am right now. I'm actually sitting in my boss's office. She's been gracious enough to allow me to do this from here, and she's sitting right there.
You're good to go with your slides, Vernon. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you all so much. So moving forward, okay, here we go. And I knew this was going to happen. Give me a second. I just got to get control. Oh, that's right. I lost control because I did something else. Okay, so as I told you, the purpose of this lesson to assist any and all participants. And remember, this presentation is primarily as it is presented to law enforcers. Although everyone here should find information that is relevant, but you may see slides that speak specifically to the mindset of those of us who are tasked with enforcing the law and being mindful of how people are treated while we do that. The number one message I have to remind individuals is you are who you are until you put this uniform on. And then we are tasked with no longer necessarily being 100% ourselves while we represent the patch and the uniform that we wear. And that means all your preconceived notions, ideas, thoughts go out the window, because at that point, no one cares. If someone needs your assistance, that's what you're there for. Like I said, service means what can I do for you, not what can I do to you. So that should remain up front. It's for participants to understand, appreciate, and be sensitive to the diversity within and the concerns of the LGBTQIA+. Trust and believe, people have a hard time even with all the initials. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning or queer, intersex, asexual, or ally, and all others, which is what the plus is for, communities. People get stuck with that. What does all that mean? Look it up. In today's technological world, you can Google that and find out. But people act like when they Google up some statistic or some little known fact about something meaningless, something important that they should be aware of, they don't use the same forums to find and educate themselves in those particular areas. You don't always need someone. Use the same thing we use for any other question. So that's what I tell them. And again, culturally competent service, what is that? It just means to have a certain level of awareness in order to better serve the community that you're dealing with. So, you know, when we deal with different cultures, we try to get a certain awareness of what those cultural norms are so that we don't offend anybody or force somebody into being pigeonholed into doing something that they're not comfortable with. For example, some cultures will not look people in authority eye to eye. But here in America, a lot of times we say, look at me when I'm talking to you. And we tend to like almost bully someone into, I'm talking to you, look at me. And to them, looking at someone in authority eye to eye would be disrespectful. We learn those things. And so to allow someone to look away while you still give them direction, understanding that that's how they are culturally, that's culturally competent. We had to teach people you do the same thing when it comes to LGBTQ. It's the same type of mindset. So some of the definitions we touch on: sexism, prejudice or discrimination based on gender; heterosexism, a form of discrimination that favors heterosexuals over lesbians, gay men, and bisexuals; homophobia, fear of or contempt for lesbians and gay men; and internalized homophobia, to take in society's messages and have these beliefs become our own. Society is progressing, and it's at a snail's pace, I would say, but I think River would concur that we have, as a society, gotten better, but we're not well. We're better, but we're not well. There are plenty of people who still run around and have a total homophobia. And some of it is internalized, some of it is quite external, some of it is quite blatant in their treatment of LGBTQ people. So therefore, we have to put this message all the way out there.
I
Trust
think
and believe, this is not a sugar
transphobia
coat.
is
I'm sorry, go ahead,
totally-
please.
No, I think transphobia is
Mhm.
where we need the most growth right now
Okay.
in this country. Yeah.
Would you please explain for those that may not know what transphobia is?
So transphobia is essentially discrimination against transgender and non-binary people.
And the biggest killer, again, a lack of understanding, lack of knowledge. It is that level of again, educational ignorance that leads people down that path. And they are sometimes so afraid to learn because they think it's going to have some impact on them. Trust and believe, folks, it doesn't rub off. You know, it's not like you go wake up in the morning and have feelings that you didn't have yesterday. And because the majority of the room is educators, I'm sure that in certain areas I'll be preaching to the choir, but thank you for listening. Who internalizes these messages? Everybody. Even members of the LGBTQ community internalize these same messages, that feeling of being less than because you're being treated less than. Doesn't mean you are, but it becomes a hard message to ignore when sometimes you are bombarded by that. A lot of times, the biggest problem we find, especially amongst young adults, is the non-acceptance from within their own families. That just kind of tells them, incorrectly so, that society may be right because they don't see any avenue in which there is a level of acceptance except from within. And I think we could all understand how terrible a rejection of family would be. There are statistics that say that suicide goes up when there is familial rejection, as opposed to just societal rejection, etc. One of the questions we ask people is, what is the origin of sexual orientation? Most people get extremely stuck right here. And again, it's just a question designed for people to understand you like what you like. I've had people sit there and not really know how to ask. And I said, well, who drinks soda? And so I'll ask people in the room. Matter of fact, it's morning. How about this? Do we have coffee drinkers in the room? Show of hands, coffee drinkers. Some of us are holding up our cup. How many like Dunkin' Donut? How many like Starbucks? How many like something totally different? Why? What's the difference? For those people that say coffee is coffee just coffee? No. Is soda just soda? No. Why are there battles between Coke and Pepsi? But why do people like what they like? Because you just do. Would we all concur with that? So the basis of sexual orientation, I can't tell you. There's no physiological explanation for it. You like what you like. You like what you like. You're young, you're growing up, you see somebody and there's an attraction. You can't explain where that attraction comes from. Most of us can't. You know, it's why we don't all like the same things. I've been with groups of friends and someone goes by and they're like, and I think we've all had this habit. It's like, oh, wow, look at them. Woo, stunner, knockout. And someone else is like, okay, if that's what you like. And it's like, what? You can't agree that that person is gorgeous? To you, maybe. And we don't all just treat it the same way. So that's how that conversation goes down. Only to introduce the understanding that people like what they like. And that they, you know, there's people that try to pray away gay and all kind of stuff. They think it's an uncontrollable thing that you choose to be this way. Like, I had this and I had that, so therefore I chose. And you have to kind of go all the way back to that understanding that says, no, you just like what you like and you don't have control over that. You can force your way beyond it. You can try to deny it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so this is one way that we introduce that particular concept. Coming out. Coming out is so important. Identity conflict, a time when, again, these certain negative attitudes that society holds now conflicts with a growing awareness of who a young person may be. Now the message is clear. We look at life this way, and you look at life that way, and you're not the normal person. And these are words that get thrown around, and they are so hurtful to someone who doesn't want to be seen as anything but like their classmates or like the other individuals around them. And again, if that starts at home, then it becomes a very painful time period to try to go through that, because sometimes people try to fight their way out of it, or they're told you don't have to be that way. You can make another choice. We're gonna go to church more. We're gonna do this. We go to therapy. We're gonna do that. There's people that think that you can be convinced to be someone other than you are. And trust and believe there are plenty of people out here who live alternative or hidden lifestyles in an attempt to meet societal norms to the detriment of their own mental health. And I think it's important that we talk about that. Right now, people want to talk about mental health in young people all around the country. And a lot of times they don't want to get to the root of what these very serious problems are. So it takes on different identities as it goes through. But I've found that these are areas that just really jump out. And because I spent so much time working around young adults in high schools, et cetera, especially junior high, intermediate school and high schools, this becomes a time period where young folks really have a need for people to be understanding and to have those ears that they can talk, or have at least people attempt to understand who they are. So that becomes very important. Any questions so far, everybody good? I'm monitoring the chat. So if you have anything that you want to just throw in there, you can throw it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and please jump in. I don't like being a talking head. I prefer anything interactive that works for me. So I don't want any of you to feel that you're locked in and you can't say anything and all you have to do is just listen. We all good so far. Everybody all right? Thumbs up, nods of the head, blink your eyes, do
I
something.
see someone's got their hand up, Vernon.
Sure.
Terry, you got your hand up?
Yes, I do. Good morning. I just
Hi.
not sure if you're going to end up addressing this as we go in further, but looking at your slides, the last one says not a one-time event, ongoing throughout life. So I work with kids ages 5 through 18 and have my own, in their 20s.
Mhm.
And some kids that I've experienced, working with, and personally, they've known from a very, very young age, 2 to 3 years old. When am I going to be a boy? When am I going to be a girl? And speaking with other parents. And, at young ages, they can't articulate exactly how they're feeling and their confusion. So, I think sometimes it's misunderstood, but then, kind of fast forward a little bit, the kids then that I may start working with, say in middle school or high school age, now they want to identify, like you mentioned, earlier, female today, male tomorrow. There's a lot of experimenting as well. So in, of course, treating everyone respectfully, and in terms of mental health, being a clinician, it's okay, where do we go from here to assist them the best way when some of them are experimenting? It's just a fad. And I really don't like using that word, but I'm being very honest and transparent, as far as, well, let me try this. Everybody is doing it. Let me try something different. And it's not really, they have, as far as like, difficulties with their, identity, so to speak, where their brain doesn't match the body. It's just, this is the times that we're in. And I find myself, sometimes having difficulties navigating through that. And
Vernon, do you mind if I take this one?
and so, please, just please help.
River.
Hi, Terry, how are you?
Thank you. I'm well, thank you.
So I have a great way of being able to explain this for you. So the best way for me to explain this is that children at a very young age have not been socialized by adults yet at all. So inherently, they know who they are.
Mhm.
They have not been told who to be, and they know exactly what they are and who they are. We haven't told them. So we have to listen to children when they say who they are. And if they change their mind, we have to listen. And that's okay. And we may say it's a fad right now, but really what it is we're finally giving children the space to say, oh my goodness, you can explore safely. You have the ability to do it in a way in which you are not going to be shamed and you are not going to get hurt. You are not going to be in trouble. You are not going to be put in a space in which there is going to be violence. There is safety and security. So you have the ability to figure out exactly who you are during this time while you grow up. So I wouldn't call it a fad. I would say we are now finally in a space in which gender is fluid. Our society, because of racism, has brought rigidity in gender. Gender has never been rigid. If you look at our history has brought rigidity in gender. There was never rigidity in gender. Gender roles were never binary. So if you want to take it and take a step back and say, okay, so it is kind of scary saying like, how do we do this? How do we bring in that space for our young children to explore? That's the hard part, especially as clinicians. But what I would say is let them explore.
And
let them explore.
It does. Okay, so that's perfect. So my verbiage is a little different than yours, but like, yes, just whoever you want to be today. I don't care
okay.
who you want to be today. Exactly. And if you want to,
give them that
come
space.
in, dress, exactly. Okay, perfect. Okay.
What a great answer.
Thank you.
Great answer. Thank you,
So
River.
even okay. So I'm at least on the right track. Thank
You are.
Even more so, like, thank you very much. Like,
Yeah, and River, in case you can't see
Thank
the
you.
chat, you got a couple of rounds of applause and definitely an acknowledgement from Jenny and Kathy. Great answer. And I'm glad you said that part of it is that space to grow safely. And see, that's where we come in. Most people are intimidated by law enforcement anyway. Here we are, we're in uniforms, and we're perceived as this entity that should protect you. But a lot of kids find us as being uniform bullies, especially when there is a level of insensitivity. If kids are getting picked on, they want to be able to turn to someone who's not going to be judgmental and have this mindset like, well, what did you do? Or this line of questioning that kind of leads them to feel like you brought it on yourself and this is why you are where you are. That's why I said in the beginning, when we do things like they're coming through scanning, don't make a big ordeal or a big show out of someone's mindset in regard to how they gender identify themselves. Treat them like the person coming through the door. Scan them, let them go to class, let them be who they are. It's not affecting how we do the job. It'd be different if I had a real issue and it causes me to miss something that might cause harm somewhere else. But if I can just very simply bring you in the normality of how I bring everyone else in, how easy is that for the mindset of being able to go to class and continue on your day without wondering where you fit in? You should be able to fit just like the other folks in your class. And that's why it's important for us. We are a very visible entity. And I think everyone can now agree that in the wake of things like the Uvalde situation, you're going to see more law enforcement in your buildings, whether you want it or not. And unfortunately, it's a hard lesson to learn to take somebody who's used to enforcing the law out in the street, where the mindset is basically it's my way or the highway. And there's sometimes this mindset, I don't have to be sensitive. I need to tell you what to do. And my expectation is that you're going to do it. And I don't have. No. You're coming into a school. These are children. Your mindset of how you do everything, including enforcing laws, rules, and regulations, has to change. You have to soften up a little bit, because a lot of times what kids do is not predicated on being unlawful, illegal, mean, or a lot of it comes from a lack of understanding. Everyone in the building has a responsibility to be an educator, and that includes educating kids about the law, educating kids about what it means to pick on other kids. You got to talk to the bully the same way you talk to the victim. It's not just all about focusing on one or the other. You have to be able to help everybody. That's why I am so big on pushing that you are of service. It is a service profession. You're not there to just lock up everybody, especially when we're talking about kids. To introduce a child into the American criminal justice system is one of the biggest disservices you could do to them. That's something that will follow them and haunt them more than anything we're going to talk about today, if that introduction is wrong, because that's something you can't escape from. So please be mindful of that as well. Thank you. Again, a lot of times people come to the realization that society is wrong, not them. And that's a positive outcome. It goes back to what Rick was saying. Once people start realizing I have room and space to be who I am. You heard her bring up the issue of race in America. That's a whole different conversation, but guess what? It's predicated on the same lines of allowing people to be who they are without fear of being attacked for not being like someone else. It's the same mindset, and that's how it's always been approached, and that's a beautiful thing as we start to grow and open our eyes here. People may not always ever be comfortable with being LGBT, but accept it. We talk about people living secret or dual lives. Yes, you all hear people talk about people living on the down low and all this other kind of stuff. It's because they want to present a certain face or image to society and then still be able to be who they are in other forms, because a lot of times people really have this feeling that they can't be accepted 100% for who they are and then still be within certain given forums or entities. I've seen it. I used to work on Wall Street. That mindset was very prevalent. Again, are things changing? Yes. Are we growing? Yes. Are we getting better? Yes. Are we well? Absolutely not. Because I still run across plenty of people that go, Vern, I hear what you're saying. I understand all that. And then comes the but. And like that but is the thing that will always worry me, because I can't be with that person every second when that but crosses their mind and they decide to treat somebody other than how they should be treated. So you have people who listen to this message, see these presentations, and their mind is going, yeah, okay, if it's me, I'm going to do whatever they think they're going to do anyway. And that gets kind of rough sometimes. But I would rather have the information be out there and have the ability to touch some people than to touch no one at all. We talked about the fact that there are suicidal attempts. We get a lot of young people, especially in New York City schools. My boss is here, she could tell you. We sit and see messages and things that come across our phone and our radio all day about young men and young women with suicidal ideations. We don't always get to, again, be the fly on the wall to hear what these are about. But there's a lot of times when these are really prevalent things. And again, different surveys, different statistics say that LGBT kids are up to 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual peers. And like we said earlier, if there's family rejection, that goes up to 9 times more likely. And that's a rough thing to deal with. It's very difficult. And again, the clinicians in the room can tell you it's rough to sit down and talk to a kid who wants to end their life and they are serious about it. You know, a lot of times I think we poo-poo things. And again, people do think some things are fair. Kids are also very mimicry. They will mimic things they see that they think works for someone else, including suicide. If they feel like that way out worked for someone else, they may give it a shot. And it's unfortunate when their mindset is very real. I've seen an increase over the past couple of years of the amount of young men and women that are coming to our counselors' offices or articulating to the adults around them that they honestly feel like killing themselves. That to me is a little bit more than a fad. That's something that needs to be looked at a much deeper level, because there's a bunch of motivators that go into that. These are not kids that are just saying it because they want attention. And I know a lot of times we hear that they just are crying out, they want attention. Give them the attention. You can get attention just by being bad. There is such a thing as negative attention. But when a kid says they want to kill themselves, that must be, in my opinion, approached with the utmost sincerity and severity to make sure that that doesn't go all the way down. Because it's a terrible thing to see anyone take their life. And we have adults taking their lives every day as well, especially in the law enforcement community. So I don't poo-poo that in any way, shape, or form. Institutionalized homophobia. This is one reason that law enforcement got so in so much trouble. We always joke, what's a great motivator for change when it comes to the police department? And we all laugh and we all agree. We always say lawsuits. When we get sued, we make changes. People sit down, policies change, mindsets change, things get implemented because they just don't want to go to court. They don't want the money and they don't want the negative imagery. We have gotten blasted over the years. You know, they have the big celebration here based on Stonewall. Stonewall was a New York City police department embarrassment for how all of that went down and the repercussions of how people were treated that day by the police. And even during those meetings that I told you guys in the beginning that I went to, I saw the levels of insensitivity. There was a panel of LGBT individuals that were speaking back and forth with the bosses. And I remember one of them just kind of got frustrated. And he was like, and they were talking about terminologies. He was like, well, what do we call you people? And right then, just that reaction, from those of you I can see on the screen, most of you immediately looked up and you had this little frozen moment like, you people. Because I think we all absorb a little bit of how that feels. And me being Black, you know, I've had my moments of that you people type thing. And everybody just got quiet. And the person very simply answered and said, I have a nameplate sitting right here in front of me. So if you can't figure out what to call me, look at the nameplate. But please be advised, behind my name comes Esquire. And it's like the next time you address anybody on this panel as you people, the next time you say it, you'll say it in court. And the whole mood of the room, some people laugh, but he kind of got the message like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to come out like that. But that was exactly how it came out. So I'm going to push forward a little faster because unfortunately I only get a certain amount of time and then I got to pass it over to River. And I know it's a lot and I wish I had more time and maybe down the road, I'll get everybody in front of me. I'll come out. I'd love to come to Connecticut. I don't get out of New York enough. But does everybody kind of see where this is going from the standpoint of a mindset of how we are trying to get law enforcement, especially those that work in schools, to be more sensitive to our children? Does everybody get that this is where the majority of this information is going? If you can kind of understand that, give me a nod, give me a wave, then I think I've gotten something accomplished this morning. We good? How's everybody doing? Jenny, Emma, I see you. So yeah, I shout people out. Suzanne Tyler, beautiful. I love the blue. See, yeah, it works. Nazario, my man, Mr. Figueroa, how you doing? Good. Hi, Miss Cassidy. You just popped in out of nowhere. You know what? I have to do this, Stacey. I love names. Kabasa Kalian. Did I get it right?
You did.
Good
job.
Like that. I am such a namey or wordy. I love stuff like that. So Stacey, thank you so much for being here today. Jenny says she works in a Catholic school, so she can, yeah, big time. Says she can relate to institutional homophobia. Absolutely. I could see how parochial school would really have as a yeah. Wow. I couldn't even picture how that works. So, see, in New York City, for us, we only cover the public schools. We don't do private schools, nor do we do parochial schools. We cover all New York City public schools, including the charters that are included within New York City public school buildings. So the majority of the kids we deal with are the average kid who just comes to a public school And what we want them to understand at the end of the day is that we are not the enemy. We are not the enemy. When kids are having problems in schools, our job and responsibility is to be there for them. So the last thing we want is for them to be afraid to approach us at any level, regardless of who you are. It shouldn't matter who you are. If you need my assistance, you should be able to walk up and say, Officer House, this is what's going on. This is what I need. Can you help me? Without fear of any predilection or any preconceived notion about how I'm going to treat you because of who you are, how you live, or how you look. None of that should have any bearing on how people are treated within society, especially by law enforcement. So I'm just going to kind of push forward and say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This was just a snippet, but I really want to thank Kathy for inviting me today. And I hope some of what you heard this morning helped. My information is around, the presentation will be around for you guys to be able to sit, look at it, pour through it at your own leisure. And again, I'm about to pass this over to River. I also have a day I got to get to. As you see, I'm at work. So thank you all so much. And I appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you very much, Vernon. Before I introduce River, does anyone have any questions for Vernon? Thank you for that great presentation. I love your openness and everything that you've shared with us this morning. I think has been really beneficial. But what about the rest of you folks? Any questions?
I'm seeing all the thank yous. Thank you guys as well. And if there are no questions at this time, then I'm going to unshare my screen.
I think Terry has her hand raised, unless
Oh, I'm
that's
sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
I will be quick. I am
That's
just
fine.
curious. I'm just gonna say you, are you and those that you work with, is there like say initiatives to have this type of training for school staff, like, you know, administrators, teachers, like everyone in school, not just for those of us who want the information? Like, this is something, you know, is it something that, you know, as like a professional development day, this is something that we're teaching and you know, educating everyone on?
Yes. Yes. Actually, I've actually gone out to a number of schools, especially once people actually see or hear it. And I usually get that response that says, oh my goodness, could you come out? Could you talk to me? Could you talk to my staff? I'm always so pleasantly surprised when people open up and are honest enough to say, you know what? I didn't know this, I didn't know that. And some of what you said has helped so much. Even when we talk about the use of pronouns, and I'll just share this before I go. As you see, River has, you know, Kathy has she, her, and hers. River has they and them. I see Emma with she and her. People get stuck because someone may walk up and say, hi, my name is River. I go by the pronouns they and them. And then they feel like they have to respond in kind. If that's not how you're used to introducing yourself, you can't try to force yourself or fight your way in if it's just not natural. That in and of itself appears to be phony. If that's just not, if River walked up and introduced herself that to me, I would say, hi, River, my name is Vernon, because I'm not used to saying, and I use the pronouns he, him. I can do it, but I have to learn it like anybody else. If it's not normal, don't do it. If it's not who you are, don't do it. And people feel so comfortable saying, I thought I had to respond in kind. No, you don't. They told you their name, tell them yours. She goes, hi, I'm River. I go, hi, I'm Vernon, and I'm good.
Typically, I'll ask.
Exactly. And that's what I do. I say, you know, and if I'm not sure, I go by my eyes first. And then I very simply ask, and I try to be as polite about it. If I get corrected, I don't get an attitude. If I were to say she and she goes, oh, I'm sorry, please say they. And I would say, okay, they. And I so apologize. I hope I didn't offend you. And you got people who, again, because they have power and authority, they think it is so wrong to be able to say, I'm sorry, or I apologize, not realizing that you elevate your own humanity when you can acknowledge your shortcomings. And kids totally embrace it by the fact that you're even trying to understand. Like I've had, again, young adults in my world who've come to me and said, House, can you teach the rest of them how to do that? Because it was just so cool that you even asked. It's like, how'd you know to ask? I said, I didn't know. but I felt it was safer to ask than to not ask. And they like, yeah, that was really cool. Appreciate you. And they'll just throw up the deuces and go on about their business. But it lets them know that they can come back and approach me, because if they know nothing else, whether I know or not, they know I'm open-minded and I'm willing to listen. And sometimes for a kid to be an ear when they want to talk is one of the best things they can have at their disposal. So once
Asking is
again, thank you,
acknowledgement.
everybody. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there. God bless and have a good day. Bye.
Vernon.
Thank you very much, Vernon.
You're very
Thanks so
welcome,
much.
Kathy. We'll talk. I'm going to unshare my screen so that River can take control. And there we go.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I'm sorry I have to leave. I got a day and I got a class in. So have a good day, everybody.
Have a great day.
You too.
Okay,
You
great.
too.
So we'll call this the 7th inning stretch. If anybody needs to stand up, fill up your coffee real quick. But we're gonna move forward in the interest of time, because like I said, I know a lot of you folks are here during your school and work day. We want to get you out on time. And I know River has another wonderful presentation for us. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started by introducing her. Harm reduction. She is the River Ramos goes by the pronouns they, them. River is the Harm Reduction and Prevention Assistant Director at Apex Community Care. River is a trans, non-binary mental health and disability advocate that has been working in HIV prevention and harm reduction for the last 3 years. Their passion recently driving them to pursue their master's in public health at Johns Hopkins University. Very impressive. As a Bloomberg Fellow focusing in addiction and overdose, they are able to make a lasting impact on their local community, fighting against the devastating overdose crisis with Apex Community Care as their collaborating organization. So I'm very happy to have River with us this morning. Thank you so much, and we're excited for your presentation. So take it away.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. And thank you, Kathy, for making an effort. I do understand that it is difficult, especially since it is new. Using they, them pronouns is something that takes practice. So
Thank
and
you
that
for
is
your
something
kindness.
that we are going to talk about today. So this is awesome, and it is a great start to the presentation. All right. Thank you, Allison. I love colors, and I am also an artist. All right. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time to learn with me today. My name is River, and I use they, them pronouns. As Kathy said, I am trans non-binary. I'm the assistant director with Apex, and I am the Bloomberg Fellow with Johns Hopkins, and I work with Apex as the collaborating organization with the Bloomberg American Health Initiative. So I get to do a lot of harm reduction work with both Apex and Johns Hopkins. It's awesome. And I'm going to be talking with you guys today about the importance of safer, inclusive spaces for LGBTQ+ youth and how these spaces can be cultivated in our school systems. Let's see, is it gonna, there we go. So one of the first things I want to take note is that as we go through these slides today, we're going to build on these concepts, and ultimately it's going to allow you to be able to create these inclusive, safer spaces for our youth. We are going to be talking about some sensitive topics. So if you need to take some space, please do so and step away. And you can also privately message Kathy if you need to take that space. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. I may be able to see the hand raised. If not, Kathy, if you wouldn't mind just saying something so that they can speak. Otherwise, you are more than welcome to put something in the chat. So one of our first goals that we're going to be talking about, I was hoping that Vernon would have time to be able to go through things. I'll try to go through it fairly quickly today, is going and talking about sexual orientation, gender identity, so terminology and gender expression. We're going to be talking about correct usage of chosen names and pronouns and what that means. I'm also going to be going over the term dead names because these are a very common usage, especially among LGBTQ youth in school systems and school spaces. We are also going to be identifying key risk factors and protective factors for LGBTQ youth suicide and mental health concerns. We're going to be recognizing signs of crisis, and we are also going to be identifying not only safe trans and queer suicide helplines, but also other crisis resources as well. And just so you do know, we will also be sending these slides over to all of you so that you have these resources for yourselves as well. And at the end, we will be taking everything that I teach you guys so that you can then take all of this to be able to integrate what you learn to create safer spaces for your students in your schools and spaces that you work with for your youth. Okay. I'm still getting used to, I'm using 2 screens right now. All right, so we did kind of do this already, but because we're practicing, I would like everybody to put your names and pronouns in the chat. And because this is a separate workshop, I'd also like to see what you were hoping to get out of this workshop specifically. And I would like everybody to put that in the chat box. I'm going to give you about 1 minute to 2 minutes. Awesome, we're getting a whole bunch. I'm gonna start. Thank you. We have so many people today, I'm so happy. So I'm already getting some responses in how to create safe spaces and bring more awareness, getting more knowledge and education, supporting our students. Yep. Educating staff. Yeah, that's a big one. And I'm hoping to be able to share enough information that we can do that as well. Always looking to learn how it moved. Always looking to learn how to support your youth and bring awareness to staff and agency. A great understanding of everything, whatever helps our students. Yep. Supporting students and making sure I am respectful. Yep. So it seems like everybody's on the same page. That's awesome. All right. So I'm going to move on. Learning to be more mindful and inclusive. That's awesome, Melissa. So we talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to go in more detail. Now we're going to elaborate towards the end on some tips and in regards to implementing pronouns and chosen names in the classroom. But we did kind of briefly go over etiquette, but I want to kind of be able to explain it in more detail and how to practice. So just so you are aware for myself, and this is me kind of sharing so that I can explain, River is my chosen name. And I do have a dead name for myself. So if you were to know my dead name and say, accidentally call me by my dead name and you were to get corrected, say by somebody, that would be something where you would immediately go and correct yourself and move on, right? So that would be a correction, move on, because we don't want to dwell on these things and make the students uncomfortable. And we can apologize, and it's totally okay to apologize. I think it's important to acknowledge those mistakes, but we don't want to keep over and over saying sorry or making it obvious that we're kind of tripping over ourselves, because it takes consistency and practice, right? We're going to make mistakes. It's going to take practice. It's not natural, like Vernon said. We're implementing new things into our vocabulary and into our speech. So sorry, my slides ended up getting moved. So we want to make sure that we're correcting ourselves ASAP if we say those pronouns wrong. And if another faculty or staff does say the pronouns wrong for our students, that we acknowledge that for them, so that we have the ability to be able to allow that student to see that we're validating our students' identities, and we are seeing them and saying, hey, I see you. They have that reassurance that while we are in this space with you, you are seen and heard. This is a safe space while you are here in this school or in this educational space. Yep, be more aware, be respectful. Yep, as population I work with. Yep. I work with youth from a diverse background and want to be as competent as well. These are awesome answers, guys. I just wanted to read through any of the ones that I missed. So another thing that I wrote down that I want to also address, that's really good practice, and it may not come naturally at first, but it will also help with making this normal for you and quickly, is using your own pronouns and introductions, right? And that was what Vernon had said, well, this isn't normal. So if I go and I introduce myself, hey, I'm River, and I use they, them pronouns, and I then go say, oh, hey, my name is Kathy, because this is not normal for me, then that's fine if it's not normal for you, but you want to create that space for your students, then start practicing that. Make that something that becomes normal for your classroom or your class space, because that will then become normal for all of the students, because you're setting that example for them. So now it becomes something that you are also creating that space for. Okay, now you're saying to everyone, well, this is something that's the norm in my classroom. And when a trans or non-binary student comes in and they see, wow, my teacher introduces themselves with their pronouns, even though they don't necessarily identify as trans or non-binary, this is really cool. This means that they care, right? So that means they're paying attention to my identity and my peers' identities, and that matters, right? So it may come off weird at first, it may feel strange, but it's showing that you care and that they matter. And really at the end of the day, there's so many diverse genders nowadays and identities that it takes 2 seconds just to say, hey, I use she, her pronouns, or I use she, they pronouns, right? Takes 2 seconds to write that in your signature of your email so that people know, right? You know, I present as female, so I get mixed up most times. I'm very resilient, so it doesn't really bother me. So I get used to now at this point really kind of introducing myself where, hey, my name is River, I use they, them pronouns, because I know that I present as somebody very feminine, even though I only use they, them pronouns. So I encourage a lot of my cisgendered friends and family to introduce themselves with their pronouns, because it makes them uncomfortable, because they're not used to it. Because I know that if we create a general space of using your pronouns on a regular basis, you start to create that culture. Okay, so intersectionality, what is it and why is it important for our LGBTQ youth? So in 1989, Kimberly Bradshaw, a Black feminist, coined the term intersectionality to explain the oppression of Black women in America. And today it's expanded to identify a number of intersections and identities to reveal challenges in communities so we can advocate for tools and solutions to bridge gaps of some of these interlocking or intersectional disparities. So I actually want to take a minute or two to have you all write in the chat box or raise a Zoom hand so you can speak and tell me what your thoughts about these intersections and how they can impact our trans and queer youth that you work with in the short and long term. So think about this. We don't just simply identify with one or two things in our lives. So for myself, I am somebody who is not only trans and non-binary, I am also queer. I am also somebody who is disabled. I am also somebody who is someone who is a student, and so I have many intersecting identities that impact my life and have impacted my history as well. So that impacted me growing up to become who I am today. So let's see what everybody says in the chat about how they could also affect your students. Yes, we are multidimensional people. Thank you, Kathy. As a mental health counselor, I use a very similar diagram with most students. This helps all to understand that we are made up of many identities. Exactly, Tammy. It really is true. And I'm going to expand on this point a little later.
I have a comment, River, and I've noticed this in myself that a lot of times, when I quickly meet somebody or I just know somebody as an acquaintance, I don't really have the opportunity to see them to the depth of the person that they really are until I take the time to really get to know them better. And then I'm always thinking, wow, this person is just so much, and that's how we all are, right? We're all way more than what we appear to be on the surface or from the outside.
Right. So even when I just explained myself and I mentioned, hey, I'm disabled, I'm here presenting right now and sharing all of this information, and I have an invisible disability and nobody would ever know that. And these are things that affect our story and affect our ability to live our lives. And our youth have that same impact as well. And it affects their health outcomes and it affects their experiences. We have to invest the time to get to know people, especially young people we work with. Exactly.
Hey, River. This is easier to just say out loud. I would start typing it all. But this is Jason. I was just saying it influences students' opportunities and feelings of power within each facet of the wheel because they may have power and privilege in one identity of their life and then power or lack of power, privilege, and opportunity in another. So it definitely, each person is in a true individual in their intersectionality.
Yes, 100%. Thank you. That's a great way to put it, Jason. Terry, you have your hand raised.
Hi there. I can, identify with, with some of the things that you said. And it's interesting because, just when you say, you look at someone, you wouldn't think like, say, for example, using your words, you have a disability and you wouldn't know that. Myself as well, just kind of, looks are deceiving, but
Right.
Everyone has a story. So when we talk, when I talk to my kids and my parents, because I work with families as well, I try to get them to expand on, okay, we are really more similar than dissimilar than we think we are.
Right.
So, once you get to know people, again, it's, very important, but even as far as like, even being victims of, some sort of, unfortunate circumstance, even sharing that, yes, we're similar. In the end, I like to say, look, we all bleed red. And then it kind of puts things into, somewhat of a perspective, but, we're really more similar than we are dissimilar, but sometimes we're just afraid to talk about it.
Right.
This is having the conversation.
Exactly. And really what this shows is that these are the marginalized parts of ourselves that may honestly bring challenges to our experiences. But like Jason said, some of these also might bring privilege to some of our experiences as well. And it just helps tell our stories so that we can connect with our communities, right? I do have 2 more participants with raised hands, and then I do want to move on because I just want to make sure that we don't miss anything. I have a lot of really good stuff to talk about. Let's see who has their hands raised.
It's Jeremy and then Allison.
Okay, so let's do Jeremy first and then Allison.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy, and I'm a school counselor intern at a middle school. And I think these are very formative years for the kids, and they have a lot of influences from different facets of their life, whether it be the adults in their life, their peers, or a big one that's up and coming is social media. And kids, they model behavior that they see. So I think it's really important for adults in their lives, whether it's their family or us as educators or mental health professionals, to model correct behavior for them, whether it's being kind or being inclusive and all of that stuff. So I think that's really important to recognize those influences in their lives and kind of get to know the kids as best as we can.
I agree. Thank you. And Allison.
I'll be fast. I've seen a similar wheel before, and the thing that jumps out at me about this is that another level of it is where the individual places value on these various things. So how important is race to me? How important is my income to me or my gender identity to me? So I just think it's another thing that adds a layer to it.
100%. Thank you. Okay, so this is where I was hoping that Vernon would have been able to kind of speak on this a little bit. So I'm going to go through this briefly, and then I am going to leave space for questions, just so that if there is misunderstanding between some of the things that I talk about, we can have clarification, because the foundation of our safer and inclusive spaces comes from this beautiful gender unicorn. And please use this in your classrooms. This is one of the coolest things that I have found on the internet to explain the difference between gender and sexual attraction. It is similar to, I don't know if you have seen the Gingerbread Man, but I'm a fan of unicorns, which is why I used the gender unicorn. So there is a difference between gender identity, gender expression, sex assigned at birth, physical attraction, and emotional attraction. So when we think of gender identity, look at gender identity as our internal sense of how we feel, whether it is how we feel being male, female, neither of those, both, or another gender, aka whether we are cis, which means we feel as if we were assigned at how we were born, or trans, as if we changed after how we were born. So for me, myself, I was born female, and then as I got older, I said, this doesn't fit me anymore. I don't feel like I fit in any box at all. So I am going to change my gender, and I think I'm trans non-binary. So even though I was born female, I am now identifying as trans non-binary because I don't fit in any box at all. So there are some people that have this internal sense of being male or female, neither of those, both, or another gender. So that's that internal feeling. So that identity, is that internal feeling. Then you have your expression, which is that outward expression, that physical manifestation of one's gender identity through clothing, hairstyle, voice, body shape, etc. So think of that as, you know, so for me, as you can see, my hair is a big part of my gender identity. So I've never really truly for a very long time had normal hair. I mean, normal is relative, right? But my hair is part of my gender expression. So I really value my hair being something that is between genders, you know, so I like having something that is a little bit short, a little bit long. I had a mohawk at one point, so I like having colorful hair. That's my way of expressing my gender between masculine and feminine. You know, so there is ways for us to be able to express ourselves, and your students will have that, and they will come in, and like Vernon said, you may see both sides. They may come in one day and they may be dressed more feminine. They may come in one day, they may be dressed more masculine. They may be coming in dressed in between. And if you notice, I'm using words feminine and masculine, and that is because clothes really aren't gendered. A man can dress feminine, a woman can dress masculine, and anywhere in between. And that is just based on however they want to dress. And that should not matter. We should give them that space to be able to express themselves and however they feel comfortable. So one of the things that I also really try to discuss in regards to expression of gender is not assuming by outward presentation. So we really want to ask. If you don't know, if you are not sure, ask the student, because what you're saying is, I see you and I want to know, you matter to me. So if you know that say Ray is typically somebody that dresses masculine, and they come in with feminine clothes that day, and they typically use he, him pronouns. Go up to Ray and say, hey Ray, I just want to check in with you. What pronouns are you using today? They're going to value that. They are going to feel seen and heard, and that is going to matter to them more than you know, even though that is something so incredibly simple. And that is you not assuming their gender. That is you saying, I hear you and you matter. It's as simple as that. You are not using your eyes, because at the end of the day, gender is not something that is expressed through clothes, because clothes don't have a gender. Clothes are just clothes. Sexual orientation is physical attraction. So you have that attraction physically towards men, women, or other genders. And emotional attraction would be what we call romantic attraction. So that is more of how you feel emotionally towards other individuals, not physically towards other individuals. And I can also elaborate on that further. I just want to make sure that we have time, and I can elaborate on that at the end. So now that we've built the foundation for what to expect in a safer space, which is that you are giving space to our LGBTQ youth to express themselves in these various ways, you have the ability now to talk about why these are so important, right? And it's truly because we need to take the mental health of our LGBTQ youth really seriously. These safer spaces need to be cultivated in our school systems across the entire country, not just in Connecticut. Our LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely. They have an increased risk of suicide than their peers. That was actually something that Vernon had said. There's 1.8 million LGBTQ youth who seriously consider suicide each year in the US, and they have at least one attempt every 45 seconds. And 45% of LGBTQ plus youth ages 13 to 24 seriously consider attempting suicide in the past year, including more than half of trans and non-binary youth. Now, let's connect this information back to what we learned on the slide about intersectionality. I told you we were going to go back to that. We now understand that a marginalized youth's multiple identities may be both, as Jason said, a sense of strength and pride, but also it does make them vulnerable to poorer health outcomes. And according to the Trevor Project, our Black and transgender youth report disproportionate rates of suicide risk, with 59% seriously considering suicide and more than 1 in 4, that's 26%, attempting suicide in the past year. So that being said, it's really important for us to talk about the difference between risk factors and protective factors for suicide and LGBTQ youth. So our risk factors are characteristics at the biological, psychological, family, community, or cultural level that precede and are associated with a higher likelihood of negative outcomes. Whereas protective factors are characteristics associated with a lower likelihood of negative outcomes or that reduce a risk factor's impact. So when we look at risk factors for suicide in LGBTQ youth, you have minority stress, which includes internalized stigma, identity concealment, social isolation, disenfranchised grief, impaired access to healthcare. You also have rejection and a lack of social support and affirming spaces, physical harm and bullying, discrimination, and conversion therapy. Yes, that still happens. Whereas for our protective factors, you have social support and acceptance from adults and peers, affirming spaces and activities, especially at school, policies and practices that support transgender and non-binary youth.
River, Jeremy has a question. He has his hand raised.
Yes, please ask.
Sorry, it was from before. I never put it down.
No, you're good. Please talk to me. Let's do it. What's your question?
No,
I think he said, yeah.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
didn't put my hand down from before. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries. So let's see. So when we compare the two sets of factors, let me go back. So when comparing the two sets of factors, you can see why creating safer, inclusive spaces is so vital for our LGBTQ youth, especially those who live with intersectional disparities. So I'm going to go through these briefly. And like I said, when I was going through goals, these are going to get sent to you through the resources email that's going to come next week, so that you have access to all of these resources to be able to have them at your fingertips. So you'll have the list of safer crisis resources for LGBTQ youth, and you will also have a list of general resources as well, because I have that on the next slide. So the reason that I separated the two is because LGBTQ youth, as you saw, are at a higher risk for suicide. Part of that is because we oftentimes don't have spaces in which people understand our experiences that we go through. So we need spaces, especially crisis spaces, where people actually know and can speak on the experiences that we go through. So having places like Trans Lifeline and Trevor Lifeline and Trevor Chat allow our LGBTQ plus youth to be able to have these hotlines and spaces and know, okay, I have a place that I can go to that is suicide and prevention and crisis intervention, that they're gonna know my trans and non-binary experience. They're gonna know my queer experience. I'm gonna be heard and I'm gonna feel safe. When we go into regular spaces in crisis, oftentimes it can exacerbate some of the circumstances, especially as trans and non-binary folks. We may be already activated in our trauma because the trauma may have come from family that are invalidating our experiences. So if we go into a space where, say, I'm just using an example where, you know, somebody's voice may already be low, but they identify as a woman and they're calling on the phone and they get called a man and they're not actually using the correct pronouns on the phone because they're not using that crisis resource that is going to validate them. That can further send them into a more difficult crisis for them to deal with. So having these safer crisis resources is really important. Mind you, these are things that are tools, and the reason I say safer is because they're not safest, right? And the reason I say inclusive, safer spaces is because it's not safest. We can't always completely protect our people, LGBTQ youth, peers or not. We try to keep them as safe as possible. We do the best that we can. But this allows us to be able to create the safest possible space for our people who are in crisis so that they have a place to go in which people do know the experience and can help talk them through. And they do have the ability to do that for them in a way that is informed. And as you can see, I added crisis text line. You have National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You also have the 988 that I did add as well. So what I did ahead of time, and just so that you all know too, I don't know if everybody is aware of this, which is why I am noting it. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is the same as 988 now. So I did call National Suicide Prevention Lifeline to just double check. 988 is the same. So if you call 988 or you have somebody call National Suicide Prevention Line, it is the same number now. So I will make sure to give everybody these resources so that you have that, and these should be on hand for all of you when you are creating these safer spaces for your youth. All right. Now, obviously, we have these crisis resources as last resorts. As you are building your inclusive spaces, what you are doing is you are building a space in which our students feel safe, right? So that is going to be something where as you build those spaces, mental health will get better and our youth will hopefully not need those crisis resources, but it's important to have those on hand. So that's part of why I wanted you all to have them. Now I want to be able to put everything together for you. We built the foundation for these safer spaces and school systems for LGBTQ youth. We emphasized why these spaces are so important, discussed mental health and suicide risks for youth, as well as the protective factors against those risks. And I'd like to see with a show of hands and or Zoom thumbs, camera thumbs, how many of you have heard of the term school connectedness? Yes, awesome. So I see a few. So school connectedness is the idea that students will be more likely to succeed in school if they believe that the adults and peers around them care about their education and the activities that they participate in while they are there. So how can you create safer, inclusive spaces in your school systems for LGBTQ youth based on what we've discussed today? And the reason that I put school connectedness in there is because part of creating that inclusive, safer space is to build school connectedness. And if we can build school connectedness for LGBTQ youth, you have the ability to also create a space in which they have a higher likelihood of succeeding. One of the first things that I wanted to talk about, which is something that was mentioned earlier, was being a model in the classroom and setting standards for our students. So we discussed this earlier. Normalize introducing yourself with your own pronouns, even if you haven't changed your pronouns. So make that something that is normal for you, even if it doesn't feel normal, right? So start practicing, add it into things that you do, like your emails, like your introductions, add it to things around your classroom so that it becomes something that's in the space that you work in. Normalize asking pronouns when talking to students and other staff. Like I said to Vernon, even if it's not something that you may normally do. That's why when I give my pronouns, I ask other people their pronouns. If you are not sure what somebody's pronouns might be because they may present androgynous or may look ambiguous in their gender, ask them. Even if they are not ambiguous in their gender, you should probably still ask them their pronouns because, like me, I'm female presenting, but I don't use she, her pronouns. So it would be important to ask somebody because you may never know. They may not use she, her pronouns. They may use they, them pronouns like me. So your student would greatly appreciate you if you were to ask them that, and then you were to get that validation from them where they said, wow, you actually took the time to ask me and I use they, them pronouns and I have never been asked that before. So you're modeling that behavior for the students. And if you do that on a regular basis, you're creating that culture in your classroom. And consistency is key. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to discuss is evaluating and ensuring that policies and practices support transgender and non-binary youth. The reason that I want to emphasize this is that we are at the highest risk, the highest, for mental health concerns and suicide. Because right now, especially, we are, for lack of a better word, under political attack with all of the different acts that are going around in the different states that are trying to police our bodies and tell us how we need to identify and how we need to live. And what that is showing our youth is that they are not allowed to exist a certain way, and that's not okay. So by making sure that your school spaces have policies and practices that support transgender youth to be themselves and non-binary youth to be themselves, you're advocating not only for your students, but you're also advocating for any of your colleagues that might be transgender and non-binary. And you're giving them that space to be open, and you're saying, regardless of what's going on in this world, your identity matters, because cisgendered individuals get to choose their own identity and live their own identity openly, and everybody else, transgender and non-binary, should be allowed to as well. It's no different, right? We should, no matter human or not, get to be able to live their life, and there shouldn't be policies that prevent that. So if there are outdated policies in your school spaces, advocating to get those outdated policies changed, I think is really important. Some of the examples that I used might have been like, think sports, restrooms, gym classes, etc. We're lucky to live in a state that doesn't tell our children that their existence is political and illegal. And because of that, it's imperative we support them by providing updated school practices that's inclusive of all youth in school spaces and not just some of them. So start the year fresh. Get creative with get to know you surveys. So this provides a discreet way for students to share their chosen names and pronouns with you and the class. You can also ask if their caregiver knows that, so that you, as the leader of the safer space, can keep that youth safe in the event that they are not out yet to the people they live at home with. You can also do sign-in sheets with pronouns and chosen names. Fostering affirming spaces. If you're a teacher or leader in the youth community that likes to get involved, help foster affirming spaces by encouraging students to start their clubs with their LGBTQ plus friends and allies. These spaces are healing and empowering. Take the time to implement these small action items consistently over time, and they will create long-term sustainable change for the LGBTQ plus youth you work with. Safer, inclusive spaces will be built not only for them, but for their peers too. These spaces will help your trans and queer youth feel seen, heard, and validated in their identities and experiences, healing their mental health and preventing suicide. Cultivating safer, inclusive spaces in our CT school systems will help raise the next generation of thriving LGBTQ plus adults. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn with me today. It was an honor. Do you guys have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat box. You can also raise your hand through Zoom and talk. I'm a big talker, so thank you so much.
River, I have a question.
Yeah.
When working with younger kids, do you ask them about what their parents use for names or pronouns, and how do you handle that if it's different than how the youth wants to be identified?
So I would say your best bet in that scenario would just simply be, are you open about your chosen name and pronouns at home? You don't need to ask them what their dead name and pronouns are. You can just say if they're open about it. That way, you know, okay, because you already have that information as a teacher. So you have that information, so you can kind of have that to the side for, say, like teachers' conferences and things like that. And you can prepare ahead of time for that student when you go and meet with the parents, and you can do that discreetly for the student. So you don't have to have the student out themselves with you. You can just have the student tell you yes or no. That way the student doesn't feel obligated to have to share that information with you. They can just say yes or no while giving you their chosen name and their pronoun. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Allison just dropped something in the chat asking if folks in the room want to let us know if there's a Gay Straight Alliance or any other club in their school. So we appreciate folks that are putting that in the chat box. River, I have a question. I'm not quite sure how to phrase this correctly, but I'm wondering, and I wonder if others might be wondering this too, what's the difference between someone who identifies as transgender versus someone who's transitioning? Like there is a difference, right? And I wonder if you could explain that briefly.
I like to say this term, and you might laugh at it. I'd rather you say it dirty than not say it at all. So, because this is a learning space, right? So that's why I say it like that. So somebody who is transitioning is still identifying as transgender, right? So transitioning simply means that they are in the process of becoming their most whole version of themselves. They still consider themselves transgender individuals. They are just physically changing their bodies to fully identify with how they feel on the inside.
But you can also, so just to clarify, you can be transgender and not transitioning.
Yep, I have not transitioned at all physically, but I still identify as transgender myself. So I don't, because I'm an open book, so I don't take any hormone therapy. I have never physically transitioned, but I still consider myself a transgender individual because personally, I look at transgender as the difference of I do not identify with the gender that I was born with. So if you look at the transgender flag, you have three colors. You have the blue, pink, and white. The blue color represents our trans masculine. The pink color represents the trans feminine, and the white color represents non-binary and questioning. And I fall under that color.
Thank you for that clarification. And I know so many people have already said this morning, but we really appreciate your personal touch and sharing of your own personal experience. I think that has made your presentation much richer.
Absolutely. I think that it's important to be able to provide examples, especially because a lot of times it's difficult to fully grasp concepts without examples and stories and going into spaces in which you want to cultivate classroom spaces for youth and stuff like that without examples. It makes it that much more difficult, and I'm happy to answer any questions that people have. So
thank you so much. We have about 15 minutes left, so if anyone does have other questions for River, or really anything, even any of the topics that Vernon touched upon earlier, we can discuss those. Now is a good time to do that. While people are thinking about questions, in a few minutes, because I don't want to distract everybody, but in a few minutes, I'm going to put a link to this morning's program evaluation in the chat box. If everyone could take a few moments before you leave to fill out this short survey, your
Oh, I
feedback
have the
is really
video
important.
too, Kathy.
Oh yeah, let's show that video. I love that. I think we
Yeah.
should do that right now.
I forgot
Do you-
about that.
do you have
I
it
do
accessible?
Have it up. Yep,
Okay,
I have it
perfect.
up
Yeah,
and
let's do
ready.
that.
Yep. Thank you so much, Allison. Do I need to share my sound first? So let me see.
Yes, make sure you do that. You just have to click the box. So you might need to unshare and then just make sure that you did that before you pull that up.
Jason, do you have a question?
I do, or almost a comment, or I don't really know what it is. I'm seeing more and more involvement from neurodiverse and children with special needs and or autistic children, you know, being involved in our LGBTQI programs. However, some of, you know, even for myself as a social worker, I may not have that advanced specialization in supporting children with special needs. So it's also, I guess, a learning curve is how do we incorporate that intersectionality of diverse children, you know, who maybe are neurodiverse or autistic within the LGBTQI, and ensuring that we have the resources and availability to help them, because sometimes we don't.
I think that
It's extremely challenging. So it's like we need almost more training and resources on how to do that. And so I don't even know where, it's more of a comment. It's just what I'm seeing.
So I actually have a resource for you to look up. So my invisible disability that I was talking about is that I am autistic. So look up Reframing Autism. It's an awesome resource. What I will tell you, Jason, and this is full transparency, I think that we still don't have enough information for our youth and adults, for our autistic individuals who are not intellectually disabled. There's not enough research right now. And I think we are now getting to the point in which research is happening, but we're mid, and there's just not enough completed research out there. I actually also can, Kathy, if it's all right with you, share a resource of a research article that is really awesome, that talks about a capabilities approach on autistic adults that is also really informative for youth as well. You can literally read it and it will explain how to, in general, I think, help you approach things with autistic youth who are not intellectually disabled. So I think that that will help. So I can share that as well. It's difficult right now. And I think with those intersectionalities, it's a huge challenge. But what I will say is that neurodiversity in general, we're all neurodiverse. And we don't give ourselves as individuals enough grace and credit. And I think we need to give ourselves more grace and credit in our workspaces. And I think that if you read that, you'd be really surprised by, it may even apply a little bit to you. So it's pretty cool. So I will share that with you. And Reframing Autism is doing a lot of research and gives a lot of great information that I think will help you as well. So
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So I am going to pull up that video right now. Advanced sharing options. Let's see. Share sound. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm almost afraid this might be too loud, so I'm gonna turn this down like halfway. And then can everybody hear this okay? All right.
I feel empowered.
I love that. Thank you.
So it's simple, but I feel like it really kind of represents the presentation, which is just, you know, kindness, right?
I think I saw something in the chat. Brittany, school psych intern, wants to know if you have any resources for students at the elementary level that may be beginning to explore their identity.
So have you ever are you talking about resources for teachers or resources for students, Brittany? Or it's not teachers, but faculty. Okay. I don't necessarily have resources on the end for students, but that's definitely something that I can look into for you and add to the resources that I give Kathy.
River, could you please share any resources for staff and faculty too?
Absolutely.